Could you give us a brief background on Mr. Dave Sycip?
Well, he is an industrialist and banking giant in the Philippine economy uh, from after World War II, who tried to shape regional institutions so that the Philippines can be seen as a player in a bigger field of Southeast Asian neighbors. This was very dramatically different from those who thought that the country was only an annex of other major economies, especially that of the United States at the time. But as history would show, our association with the rest of the region is what will shape the destiny of this country in the next generation.
And a lot of his ideas and a lot of his writings came out at a period, let's say, between the 1960s and the 1980s, before we had things like the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation and things like that. Right?
Because he was a visionary, he knew that the things that were going to shape the country were beyond those that people were familiar with, i.e., looking only at your industries in the country rather than how you relate to the rest of the region and the world. So, in that sense, it was quite a different way of suggesting ways for development and growth.
Some of the things that he wrote about, some of the ideas touched on the Asian Pacific or ASEAN cooperation and ASEAN trade, and then trade between ASEAN nations and large industrial nations like Japan and the U.S. As we know, they would, or as the years went by, created institutions like APEC and ASEAN. Could you tell us a little bit about how Mr. Sycip's vision differed from how APEC and ASEAN have come to be today?
Well, basically, David Sycip was viewing first the Southeast Asian economies as the springboard for Philippine participation in global economic transactions. Meaning to say, you strengthen your own industries with the help of your immediate neighbors. And then, as a group, you can have a greater voice in your trade ties with the US, with Japan, with Europe, with the bigger countries, because you will find that you have common resources and you have affinity, also politically, culturally, socially, that your people can understand each other better in positioning yourselves vis-a-vis the rest of the world. So in that sense, it's not only economic, but also social, cultural, and political affinity that would tie your economies together.
How much of that, creating a not just a trade bloc, but a unified, shall we say, cultural bloc? How much of that do you think ASEAN has achieved so far?
Well, everyone knows that when you have an economic grouping, you carry with that the people behind the industries. So industries are supposed to be led by the visionaries in their own field. So that, like Mr. Sycip, people who think about very, very specific industries, these have to be shaped first by the leaders. And it is a Thai leader, it could be a Philippine leader, let's say in the automotive versus in the agricultural sector, that will eventually shape how the region will position itself vis-a-vis the world. Take rice in the case of the Philippines.
Okay.
We were so good in the research aspect that
Rice
the world
Institute,
community said, well, this is the perfect place for the International Rice Research Institute because your professors are doing well, you're commanding respect in all the circles where rice research is being done. So, lo and behold, the world decided, let's put the Rice Research Institute in the Philippines. Of course, others like Mr. Sycip would have thought, well, the automotive industry, the steel industry could have also located in the Philippines. But I think that's for other economies to worry about because they had their own initial advantage and they started earlier in those industries, and they had better policies to make sure that their people and governments were in sync. So now we're not the Detroit of Asia. It is Bangkok. That's the
Bangkok,
Detroit
I was
of
gonna say
Asia.
Thailand, right?
But we are the leader in agriculture in terms of the research for new varieties that will stand drought, that will stand severe flooding, that will stand the test of many natural disasters. And this is a tribute to people like Mr. Sycip, who knew that the people who shape the industries are nurtured by different societies. And we have that division of work in ASEAN. So in a way, we need different champions for different sectors.
So, one of our advantages, or one of our competitive advantages, is the agricultural sector. Are there other sectors that we may have? We don't necessarily have an advantage in now, but we potentially have
Well,
an advantage.
the electronics sector is one of our best industries to rely upon because we've had several decades of being integrated into the global value chain. Our own exports of electronic components get into many computer devices, many peripherals, many electronic gadgets that we are one of the most dependent suppliers for the major producers. And this is a tribute again to the leaders of the Philippines who knew that it took not only the engineering talent but also the people talent in manufacturing, in management of operations that would matter in this kind of very high level sophisticated industry. We are among the best in the electronics sector, and we are recognized even by the World Trade Organization as a leader in the field because even in the past few years when the global economy slumped, it was our electronic sector that stood its ground.
Its ground, yes.
But that's not the end of it, because if there were a slump in the electronic sector, we'll also be affected.
Of course.
And that exposure, of course, again requires a leadership that would ask, now what can we do if there is a global slump in electronics? How will we reposition the Philippine economy and the rest of the ASEAN economy? Are we able to withstand these vicissitudes of industry changes?
When you speak of technological or tech components, this is mostly semiconductors, right? Are there other components as well?
Well, technology is more than electronics. Biotechnology, for one, is very important in both medicine for people and also for agriculture, for the food resources that the planet needs. So in a way, if you have biotechnology, as our own scientists would love to say, then maybe new industries will come out to help in the anti-poverty program of the country, or in the search for cheaper medicines that are affordable by poor people, so that this biotechnology trend will have to be also looked upon as an industry that needs champions. And these champions must be developed out of a new thinking that people and the planet must come along with profits. Because you cannot just have pure profit-oriented industries in today's very complex world.
So we need sustainability, in other words.
You need to sustain them, and the poor people are part and parcel of your consuming population. They must be able to afford what they buy.
Of course.
And I think this is what Mr. Sycip was saying. But who will buy the automobiles that our own industries will produce if there is no money available for the poor people? This is very basic in economic integration. You must have incomes generated from the industries that your poor people will be able to produce.
Yeah, the industries will be able to produce. Fantastic. So we have an edge in agriculture and an edge in technology. Most people say that the Philippines' best resource is its people, and if you take labor as an export, it would be our largest export, right? How does the ASEAN and in particular the ASEAN Economic Community, how does it play in terms of the labor markets?
Okay. Mr. Sycip was among the earliest to have thought of the ASEAN Economic Community. In fact, that phrase is written up in many of his columns and writings. A good number of decades, like 2 decades before the idea became common expression in diplomatic circles. Labor is one of those resources that the Philippines is very proud of, but unfortunately, it's only skilled labor that ASEAN allows to move freely. Because if we allowed the less skilled people to work everywhere in ASEAN, even the Philippines will say we might be eased out of certain markets. That said, we are focusing on highly trained, highly skilled, technical, professional people. So when the best of our people are working elsewhere in ASEAN, our own industrialists will ask, but what will happen to us? We will be hurt because the talents that come with the industry growth will no longer be there.
Yeah, available locally, yes.
So our trick is, can you retain those talents long enough for you to be able to generate new industries that will become your brand of economy in the future? For example, the Philippines is said to be very good in animation because our animation artists all over the world are winning awards. Yet we could have established that animation industry here not only for entertainment but for solid industrial use. An example, shipbuilding. You need animators to really show where each specific gadget in the
Component
ship gets into. And that is not just entertainment. It is solid industrial development.
This is in effect like 3D modeling, right?
Yes.
Or,
And more than
multidimensional
that,
modeling.
it's also making sure that you can design systems for building things modularly. So that as one group is doing this, another group is doing that, then somebody orchestrates the production of the entire good. And that requires the talent of animation artists so that they can be understood by people who are less technically qualified. A good example of that is in India, where we found out that Barefoot College, which is really a name for a school where illiterate people work on engineering problems, can succeed. They do solar lamps and solar cooking utensils and solar gadgets. And the grandmothers who are piecing together these gadgets are illiterates. How are they able to do this? Well, they have animation.
Of course.
And then they have color-coded electronic things that are connected together.
It's the best instructor, I guess.
And
it shows
imagine
you step by step. Yeah.
they can produce cheap solar gadgets because they are trained by professional engineers to piece them together. And that's value adding in a poor rural community. Why the grandmothers? Because the grandmothers will never leave town.
I see.
Whereas the young people who might be the engineers of the town might leave for city assignments
Yes.
or be brain drained to some other country.
Chasing the higher salaries, right?
Yes. So the Philippines is known for the brain drain.
Yes.
And that's the unfortunate
Unfortunately.
side of this global economy. So while we are noted to be the number one supplier of nurses in the whole world, the number one supplier of seafarers in the whole
Seafarers,
world,
sailors.
the same way that David Sycip was imagining, wow, if there were division of labor, what would the other countries produce? And this is the economic integration that he foresaw.
He foresaw. Great. One of the highlights, or one of the things that is most exciting about the AEC, is that it gives the entire ASEAN community a bigger consumer block, shall we put it? In other words, it's no longer if a foreign multinational wants to locate in the Philippines, the potential is not just to sell their products to 100 million consumers, but ASEAN's entire population of around 650 million. Right? Some people, however, have said that it's going to lead to a lot of internal competition amongst the ASEAN countries. How do you see that working out?
Competition is healthy, provided you also have safety nets, so that the poor will not be left without anything to buy goods with. So when we say compete and cooperate, that's the new mantra
Compete
of
and cooperate.
business schools. You must understand that you cannot just slash each other's throat. That's not the kind of business we are used to today.
The collaboration economy.
Yes. So in a way, you must understand how to complement each other. And this is true not only economically, but politically, socially, because in this very fragile planet, we must all coexist. And I think economics is a very good place to start cooperation, because as we rely on each other for cheaper inputs to produce goods that we can sell to the rest of the world, then it means jobs for our poor people.